Welcome back to my channel. My name is Derek Main and I review translated literature. It is awesome to have you here, and today is a day I've been really excited about because I'm going to review Vernon Subutex by Virginie Despentes, translated from the French by Frank Wynne, and this is an FSG Originals. So this was, I think I mentioned in my last video, my most anticipated book of this year, and the reason is the plot, basically. So what this book is about is Vernon Subutex is a guy, I think I'm getting a sense of early 50s, maybe late 40s, but he used to own a record store in France and Paris for a long time. He was very cool, very integral to sort of their rock scene there, and he's now found himself down on his luck. So in a kind of short order, he is crashing on couches to then going homeless. But one of his old friends from those days, Alex Bleach, turned into an incredibly famous rocker. Obviously it's a made-up person, but the level of fame seems like worldwide. And Alex Bleach dies very, very early on. And Vernon has in his possession at times, or at least he always knows where they're at, these videotapes that Alex made at Vernon's house, I think a few months before Alex died or something like that. And these are now sort of this holy grail or MacGuffin or however you kind of want to put it. But everyone in this scene and people outside this scene are now chasing Vernon down, trying to find him because they're trying to find these tapes. This includes a movie producer who wants to destroy the tapes because he thinks there's something very negative about him on it. This includes a porn star who is extremely popular and famous, and her partner or roommate who is a trans man. They're both on the lookout for it. There is some character called the Hyena who has been hired by the producer. This is a lesbian woman who is just like incredibly good at her job. Her job is to smear people online. She's done so with Alex Bleach, and now her job is to find these tapes. Then there is this whole world of people from the old scene that he was in. And what's interesting is all of the characters, because they're very rich, but she is unforgiving in her assessment of these characters. We have a far right-wing ex-scenester who admits to being a wife-beater at one point, and it's really, really uncomfortable. We have a sort of a failed or semi-failed screenwriter who is just kind of like a little dopey and, full of opinions and bluster, but no one really kind of takes seriously. And then as we start to develop into the next stage, which is Vernon on the street, we meet some incredible street people, most especially Olga, who is a 7-foot-tall Amazonian, like, woman of strength, but also gentle, kindness, caring, wonderful. So these are just a few of the characters. It is filled with characters, and in fact, the thing kind of unfolds like a television miniseries, or think like a Netflix show nowadays. And that makes it a lot of fun to read. This is, as you can see, one. So this is volume 1 of 3 right now. I rolled through 1. I absolutely loved it. Right now, I am just starting 2. It has not come out in America yet, but I did find it from the British publisher. And I can't seem to find, it looks like 3 has been published in French, that book is out, the final chapter, or the final book in the trilogy. If anyone knows how to get that in English, or when it's out, because it looks like it's definitely not out yet, what the plan is, either I'm assuming the British publisher will be first. Again, please let me know in the comments or tweet at me. My handle is down below. So this book is a wonderful book. It's a lot of fun, and I recommend it to anyone. So that's just kind of first off. But on the personal note side, it meant a lot to me because I was someone that at 13 years old, I went to my first show. It was Pablo's. That was the name of the club in Winston-Salem. And I went to a show then every Friday and Saturday night on for, the next 9 years. And it became an extremely important part of my life. It was my entire social life. I sang in bands throughout that time. My friendships, my relationships, everything was involved in what we called the scene, or what they called the scene. And I really liked reading about these characters. Even though they're in Paris, it felt so familiar, like I could jump right in and know them. It does a good job of showing how there's not a unifying politics in a scene. There's not a unifying characteristic, trait, personality type. That it is a mismatch of people at different stages in their life that are kind of flowing in and out. And those relationships, they're very wide but not very deep, is how I would put them. Kind of everything about someone. Oftentimes these are roommates in houses with 10 people, and they're very important parts of your life because, from 13 to, say 22 for me, they are they're shaping you completely, because of that time. But there is a lack of depth at times because the scene is so large and it is fractured in many ways, and you're going to develop some wonderful, amazing relationships. But then now we're reaching in Vernon Subutex that time where now we're much older and these relationships have frazzled, life has kind of happened, and then it's sort of a meetup again. There's this reason with these tapes for everyone to kind of be back at it. And it's really interesting to see everybody as they've now aged, matured, and who they thought they were during that time, who they thought the other people were during that time, their sense of self and their sense of place in the scene. And obviously, as a 37-year-old, I do not have a lot of relationships left, at least that I get to see every day or very frequently. Of course, there's social media, but with those that I kind of grew up with in the scene, with the exception of my two best friends who remain my best friends, and we've kind of grown up together. But with the exception of them, I don't have a lot of those relationships left. And so I really empathize with these characters as they kind of come back together and sort of not knowing how to be. There's one section I really like. Page 255, there's a little bit here about relationships within the scene that I thought was very apropos, and at least part of my experience for sure. He remembers the atmosphere of the rock industry, the studied superficiality, sarcasm, scorn, and serious conversations about record sleeves. Never any closeness, never any intimacy. Even when talking about politics, no one made an effort to be sincere. Now, I will say that one big difference between the characters in this book and my own life is this is Gen X. So I came up a little bit after that. And there's a lot of elements of Gen X that I can see are different when it comes to specifically kind of the scene and where they saw themselves. We had matured sort of at the post-punk or whatever point you want to put it at, past the point of really notions of selling out and things like that. Those weren't as big of struggles, but at the same time, we did not have that vibrancy and intimacy that was so close to the heart of, or being so close to punk rock, really. We were too far removed from 1983 and Black Flag and 1977 and the Sex Pistols and that kind of stuff to really have that sense of urgency that I do think the Gen X characters got to have that taste of. But they also held on to some principles that were slightly strange, and you can see that they grow up with them. As a book, so I read translated fiction, as you know, and I read a lot of weird, esoteric avant-garde. This is very different. I mean, it's a straight-up story. As I said, it unfolds kind of like a television show. But one of the things that I kept coming back to as I was reading it, it's kind of a modern-day noir. I mean, obviously you have the mystery, but there's the darkness of the drugs, alcohol, abuse, traumas of the characters, and, of course, the streets. There's a lot of political stuff kind of happening, when it comes to comments on people's place in society. And there's one part, actually, in, 236, where she's going to reference one of the best noir books of all time. So she says... 236 is the one I'm going to do next. 185. So 185, it's really quick, and if you blinked, you could miss it. They shoot horses, don't they? Kiko would be the last man standing on the dance floor. And that is a great reference to They Shoot Horses by Horace McClure. They Shoot Horses, don't they? Rather, by Horace McClure. One of the most influential, important, and awesome noir books, first published in 1935, that actually, and this is true for a lot of noir, became probably more popular in France than it did in America, or at least that's where it's had its like initial kind of pull. So it was really cool to see that little like quick small reference that I could get and kind of understand well, because I do love those books and I love that era. They talk about breaking up bands. I thought this was pretty good too. This is that 236. She says there are 3 ways that a band can break up: boredom leading to natural death, open warfare, or a traumatic incident like the death of one of its members. And this book is just full of that kind of, you know, if you weren't steeped in the scene, I think that it would be really, really fascinating to read and kind of get a glimpse of this counterculture, because that's what it is. And if you were, I think you'll get nostalgic. At least that's the experience that I had. The book is great. I will say I am very curious. I'm very new, only about 80 pages into 2. A lot of this is setting up the characters and setting up the situation. You know, we're doing a lot of laying the stones, or whatever the nomenclature is. And she is extremely good at that. I mean, she will just hook you into a character story, and then immediately you're going to go into another one, and you're kind of already missing one. Now we're going to have to transition into that second phase. You know, since this is a trilogy, you know, it's a little difficult to review as a standalone, because we know that she can set it up tremendously, and the characters are great. The situation that she has created is great. But now in 2, we're going to have to follow that through, right? Like this middle era is going to be one where we're going to have to start to see some action culminate in meaning, if that makes sense. There's a lot of action in this, but now we're going to have to move that story along. And is she going to be as good at moving the story along as she is setting it up? It actually reminds me really quickly, where is a book I love, Peter Matheson's Shadow Country. This edition right here is all 3 of the books, although originally I think they were published, I'm sure they were, yeah. They were published as 3 separate ones: Killing Mr. Watson, Lost Man's River, and Bone by Bone. And, I mean, this is a tremendous read. It's not translated fiction at all. But what was interesting about it was the Killing Mr. Watson, the first section, tremendous. You're hooked in immediately. It's awesome. The last section, Bone by Bone, it culminates. Everything is perfect. But that middle section, Lost Man's River, is a little tedious, to be honest. Like, it is not up to, in my opinion, the same quality and standards, and it takes a little while to get through that. And I'm just curious if that's going to happen with this. I know it's a weird comparison, but I mean, as you know, translated fiction and even literary fiction is not the world of sequels and trilogies. I mean, usually you're just kind of reading one thing. So this is very kind of different in that sense. So that's my review for this, because it's kind of going to be an incomplete review, necessarily so, since it's part of a trilogy. I will tell you that next up, we've got another fantastic woman in translation, The Factory by Hiroko Oyamada, published by New Directions, and it is translated from the Japanese by David Boyd. Pretty cool. David Boyd is assistant professor of Japanese at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. I live in Raleigh, and I work in Charlotte 3 to 4 days a week. So maybe at some point I will have a coffee with David Boyd and talk to him about this book. But next up, I will talk to you about this book, and I'm looking forward to it. Like, subscribe, comment, all that stuff. I think I'm supposed to say that. Anyway, thanks a lot. Be good, folks.